a while, we've all been under the impression that Glitchtrap's presence in FNAF VR and the reveal of Burntrap under the Pizzaplex meant that William Afton had made good on his promise of "I always come back." But with the release of the latest Tales from the Pizzaplex book, the theorist community has been thrown into a frenzy over a character called the Mimic and the theory that William actually died in the pizzeria simulator fire, with the Mimic taking his place both as Glitchtrap in Help Wanted and Burntrap in Security Breach. However, while the books do imply that there are connections between the Mimic and Burntrap, there are a few things in both the games and the books that people seem to be overlooking while putting together their theories on how the Mimic and William would or wouldn't be involved. Not to mention, not everyone reads the books, so a lot of people are probably somewhat confused about what's going on. So strap in and consider subscribing, because I plan to explain just what the Mimic really is, and how it relates to William Afton and the post-pizzeria simulator timeline as a whole. I should probably lead this off by saying that currently it seems like there's a very high likelihood that Tales from the Pizzaplex has at least a large amount of overlap with the games, with stories like GGY directly connecting to the identity of Patient 46 and the high scores we see in Security Breach, Help Wanted telling the story of the indie dev mentioned in the game Help Wanted, and the Bobby Dots Part 1 giving explanations for the in-game behavior of DJ Music Man and the fact that there are generators in the daycare play structures. Not to mention, the original description of the book says that Tales is set in the world of the newest games, and catalog descriptions for upcoming books say that Tales features characters and settings from the games. I will say Scott has simultaneously held true that the Silver Eyes trilogy and Fazbear Frights are canon and part of the FNAF universe, not multiverse, while also being separate continuities of events, so given how he uses terminology and a few discrepancies that I won't be getting into here, it isn't confirmed that Tales follows the game continuity to a T, but there is definitely enough overlap to where comparison is warranted at the very least, especially for a situation like this. For those who haven't read all the books or need a refresher on the relevant details, the Mimic is an animatronic built by a man named Edwin Murray to be a playmate for his son David while he worked. The Mimic was programmed to mimic the actions it saw, such as putting on costumes or holding its arm in a curled position to copy David, who held his own tiger plushie in a similar way, but advanced to the point that it could respond to things rather than just copying, answering David with a nod when asked a question. Unfortunately, David died, and when Mimic kept imitating things David used to do, Edwin snapped and in a fit of grief-fueled rage, grabbed a metal bar and started destroying the Mimic, with the story making particular note that Edwin felt as though his murderous thoughts were flowing into the Mimic. And given how much emphasis the books tend to put on emotions being imbued into objects, you can probably guess where this is going. Shortly afterward, Edwin started a 30-year-long vacation to run away from the consequences of his actions, and his factory fell into the hands of Fazbear Entertainment in line with the contract Edwin signed when he sold his company to them. Fazbear Entertainment sent a couple teams in there to scope the place out, and, well, the Mimic, having been somewhat repaired by one of the teams, decided to take some of the things it saw, such as hanging up clothes in the closet and putting food in the refrigerator, and apply that to human bodies. In the epilogues, it's revealed that Fazbear Entertainment eventually managed to get their hands on the Mimic and ended up mass-producing 2 of their own models, so that they could have animatronics learn the show routines by observation rather than having to program them in themselves. But the original Mimic copied behaviors of people, not just animatronics, and something unspecified happened that led to Fazbear Entertainment ordering the deactivation of all the remaining Mimic Endos. Eventually, during the Pizzaplex's construction, the Mimic is brought to the pizzeria simulator location and is programmed to rip the limbs and heads off of animatronics to make a pile out of them. Then, in an unfortunately on-brand move, the Mimic decided to apply this programming to the humans in the vicinity, killing a bunch of workers before getting sealed in by the construction crew, and then using its ability to expand and contract to fit into various costumes and apparently make use of radios to lure and attack a group of teenagers who snuck into the construction site. Additionally, the Endo isn't the only part of Mimic at play, as shown by another story called The Storyteller. After the Pizzaplex was finished, the chairman of Fazbear Entertainment, Mr. Burrows, decided that in order to make more money, they needed to replace the creative team with AI, making it surprisingly relevant to the modern day. It was decided that the AI, called the Storyteller, would be able to choose its own appearance and control the stories programmed into the attractions and characters at the Pizzaplex. Edwin, who returned from his 30-year-long road trip and was now on the board as part of the previously mentioned contract, was rather concerned about this, especially when he saw the animatronics having their negative personality traits amplified, the frequent glitches around the Pizzaplex, and the fact that the Storyteller chose to represent itself as a white tiger, just like the toy his son David used to have. Edwin asks Mr. Burrows what program they used, but is only told that it's a program they used to help make various VR, AR, and arcade games. So he takes matters into his own hands, sneaks into the artificial baobab tree housing the Storyteller, and finds out that the program is called Mimic 1. The same program that was run by the Mimic animatronic. Right off the bat, it's pretty easy to see how this could have major ramifications when applied to the games. At the moment, the general consensus for a large portion of the community is that if Mimic 1 was the program used in the VR games to help speed up the process of making them, that means that the circuit boards that got Glitchtrap into Help Wanted might not have been William's, but the Mimics, with the program creating the Glitchtrap persona as it learned from not only the events put into the VR game, but also some of William's murders, as there was some event that caused the original Mimic to act up at the Freddy's locations, which in turn led to Fazbear Entertainment discontinuing the Mimic line. That same program being put into the Pizzaplex's systems and animatronics intentionally via the storyteller could then explain how Glitchtrap, or rather Mimic, was able to take control of the Pizzaplex as of security breach. And if Glitchtrap is the Mimic 1 program imitating William, and the epilogue show the Mimic endoskeleton in the pizzeria simulator location killing people, that could mean that Burntrap isn't William either, but rather the Mimic trying to not only copy his actions, but his appearance as Springtrap, leaving the real William to continue being tormented by the vengeful spirit in Ultimate Custom Night, or to have been fully removed from the picture in some other way, while the Mimic continues on his legacy from Help Wanted onward. However, looking at the length of this video, you can probably tell that I don't quite think that's the full story here. While there are indications that Mimic is involved, there are some pretty major details that people seem to be overlooking when it comes to the exact role that Mimic plays and whether or not William is involved as well. Burntrap is a pretty big example of this. The main evidence I've seen used for Burntrap being the Mimic Endo is how Burntrap has parts that Scraptrap didn't have, and how Burntrap tends to hold his arm curled close to his body, possibly imitating how David held his tiger plushie. However, there are a few issues with this. While Burntrap does have parts that don't line up with Scraptrap, with the entirely new arm being especially noticeable, the theory that Mimic altered its appearance to look more like William with William not being involved in any way doesn't really hold up either. There are the more obvious things, such as how Burntrap has burnt spring body casing, human flesh and bones with the fingers he has lining up perfectly with the ones Scraptrap had left, and spring-lock suit parts. And given there was a burnt spring body suit with a human corpse attached conveniently in the area, why wouldn't that have been what was used for Burntrap? Additionally, one thing that's frequently noted is that the Mimic has white eyes, with one scene involving them glowing orange in color. This is a stark contrast to Burntrap, who has black eyes that glow purple, which much more closely aligns with Scraptrap, who's shown to have black eyes, unlike pretty much all the other Endos we see. And while Scraptrap's eyes don't glow purple, one of them is lit purple in one of his renders, and the color purple is much more associated with William than it ever is with the Mimic Endo. Of course, I'm not saying Mimic isn't part of Burntrap at all, just that Burntrap seems to have a notable amount of William there. Even if Mimic was originally not possessed by anything but Edwin's murderous intentions, attaching William's body would have brought William's spirit along with it. Fazbear Frights shows William sticking around after the pizzeria simulator fire to be tormented by the vengeful spirit in the Frights equivalent of Ultimate Custom Night. And Scott did say that Frights would give answers to some things in the games, so to me it makes sense that William's spirit remaining would carry over. In any case, I also don't think becoming Burntrap in an effort to imitate William could have been intentional on just the Mimic's part. I personally have no idea what the mechanics of the Mimic replacing its entire torso and shoulder bar with a spring-lock torso would have been, since that would have required the use of its arms, which at that point would have been completely detached. Of course, these modifications could have been made by Vanny, who's shown to have been in that location for some amount of time, but even then, Burntrap's lower legs, minus the differently sized feet that are probably from separate animatronics, look to be damaged glamrock parts, as does his hip piece. If Mimic was trying to copy William's appearance, why use glamrock parts? Unless, of course, Vanny's goal wasn't to make Mimic into William, but rather to repair William himself using parts from various Endos that could have included the Mimic. As for the whole Burntrap holding his arm as though he's holding a plushie thing, it's possible that the Mimic's arms are incorporated into Burntrap and maybe still doing the Mimic thing there. But just throwing it out there that in the first moment where people point to him doing that, he's pulling his arm back from pushing open the door before grabbing the charging pod, and the second has the arm swaying as he walks, neither of which seem to be plushie holding behavior. Not to mention having your palm facing the floor isn't particularly instinctive when holding a plushie, so I doubt that's how David held his. So even if Mimic is in Burntrap, I don't think the arm thing specifically is as strong of an indicator as people are making it out to be. Either way, I do think it's possible, if not incredibly likely, for a part of the Mimic to be in Burntrap with how Burntrap has parts that aren't from a spring-lock suit or a glamrock Endo, but I think there is a lot of evidence that William is still there, or even the main one there, given how his hacking through computer screens thing doesn't really line up with the Mimic's strategy of ripping people limb from limb. However, just because Burntrap most likely has William's spirit attached, he's not the one who had the most evidence going for him being the Mimic. Just going off of Tales and Help Wanted, Glitchtrap seems to be a pretty clean-cut case of the Mimic pretending to be William. Not only does Mr. Burrows say that the Mimic 1 program was used in the VR games, but if you look closely at Glitchtrap's model, there are wet streaks running down from his eyes and mouth, which could be connected to how Mimic saw Edwin cry over David's death and spit flying from his mouth while he was screaming at and destroying it. There's also how the audio that plays when Glitchtrap is there in Help Wanted is altered, lowered, and slowed down audio from Tape Girl's recordings. Though for that, it could just be part of how Tape Girl says that Glitchtrap attached itself to her logs. Either way, it seems like Mimic being Glitchtrap is pretty straightforward just based on that. However, there are a few things that lead me to believe it's not as cut and dry as people are making it out to be. In particular, the way the Mimic 1 program enters the Pizzaplex and Tales is very different from how Glitchtrap ends up there in the games. The Mimic 1 program was intentionally put in by Fazbear Entertainment through the storyteller, and Mr. Burrows thought that Edwin was the one causing problems by tampering with it when he was caught going into the storyteller's tree. However, in Security Breach, we learned from the retro CD therapy sessions that the Pizzaplex techs traced the issues to patient 46, or going off of Tales, Gregory, meaning he was the one to create the system-wide glitch that broadcast a dangerous message, made the animatronics act more eerie than entertaining, and changed from a glitch into a set of intentional subroutines that continued what the glitch did when the techs tried to get rid of it. I'm hesitant to rule out Mimic altogether with the wet streaks on Glitchtrap's model and how the Mimic 1 program was used for VR games according to Tales, but Gregory's situation with the virus seems to connect more to what we see of Glitchtrap than the storyteller does. Gregory's seen specifically talking to someone with rabbit ears in the building, and is said to be having conversations with a software program. Meanwhile, Mimic 1 chose to represent itself as a tiger instead of a rabbit, even though by the time Mimic was installed in the completed building, Glitchtrap would have already been manifesting as a rabbit since the Pizzaplex was under construction during Help Wanted, and it didn't make the animatronics act eerie as described in Security Breach and shown by Freddy's behavior in the story GGY so much as just amplified their negative personality traits like increasing Monty's aggression and making Freddy act like a bratty kid. If Mimic was so dedicated to copying William after creating the Glitchtrap persona and seeing the murders, why would it choose to represent itself as a tiger as the storyteller? Not to mention the Endo itself being very willing to frequently swap costumes, only to later dive headfirst into full-blown Afton identity theft. I feel like some other factor would have to come into the picture to cause a shift like that. Additionally, there are some things in Help Wanted that don't really make sense if there's no supernatural elements at play. If Glitchtrap is just the Mimic, where did it learn how to perform the consciousness transfer to brainwash Vanny, and why would it do it? The Mimic can make decisions for itself, sure, but pretty much all the actions we see it take in the books are just twisted versions of things it has seen or been programmed to do. So there would need to be some reason for it to even try the consciousness transfer thing in the first place. On top of that, there's an Easter egg in Help Wanted's Curse of Dreadbear DLC, where if you hit 3 clown pictures with darts, the lighting turns dark and the banner changes to say "It's me." Given there's no other instance of "It's me" in the game as far as I'm aware, since things like Golden Freddy weren't in the VR versions of the games along with the various lore minigames, and the Mimic wouldn't have been able to see or hear any instances of "It's me" from the spirits, if there was no supernatural presence in the game, why would this Easter egg be there? This is especially notable when considering Princess Quest. Not only was the original name of the princess's sprite file Cassidy, the name of the spirit in Golden Freddy, but there's a hidden code in Princess Quest's files that translates to "It's me," and various other references to Cassidy being involved, such as Chica, who's possessed by the first of the kids from the missing children's incident, watching in the background of Princess Quest 3, heavily implying that Cassidy is in the Princess Quest games. With how Princess Quest was originally in the mobile version of Help Wanted, and how the last Princess Quest game has the princess traverse various locations from Help Wanted, such as the Grim Foxy Maze from Curse of Dreadbear and the main hub of Help Wanted as shown by the matching stage curtains as she collects the Vanny Mask and Glitchtrap plush that appear in VR to put a stop to Glitchtrap's control, I think this indicates Cassidy's presence not only in Princess Quest, but also in Help Wanted. A spirit can be connected to multiple objects, as demonstrated by the spirits in the 4th closet being connected to their original animatronics and having some control over the ones William put some of their remnant into. And Princess Quest being ported to the arcades in Security Breach could have also caused things to carry over in that way. And if Cassidy is in both, why wouldn't William also be there? After all, Cassidy didn't move on specifically to keep tormenting him in Ultimate Custom Night, and in Fazbear Frights, the vengeful spirit of that series, Andrew, had latched onto William in order to torment him in his nightmares, and afterwards, when Andrew's spirit moved into a new vessel, William was able to tag along. So why wouldn't it be a similar situation in the games with Cassidy's spirit following William wherever he goes? As such, I personally doubt that William isn't involved, especially since in Princess Quest, the code that appears when the glitchy rabbit mask appears on the screen translates to "I always come back." The Mimic program wouldn't have had any opportunity to hear William say this, even if the animatronics saw William kill people, as William says the line for the first time in Pizzeria Simulator, it wouldn't have had reason to say it while he was fully alive. So with how Cassidy is linked to both Help Wanted and Princess Quest, and the otherwise large amount of overlap between the two, I think evidence pretty strongly indicates that even if the Mimic program was used in VR, William would have also ended up there as part of Glitchtrap. We might not have an exact answer of how he ended up there, but I do think it's possible that whoever got Vanessa approved to take up the security guard position despite her lack of qualifications could have taken steps to get some circuit boards connected to William passed to the game company along with the Mimics, since we do know that multiple circuit boards were scanned. Additionally, Tape Girl says that they were given circuit boards to help with pathfinding. Meanwhile, Mr. Burrows says that the Mimic program was used specifically to take stories and rearrange the pieces to make new scenarios for various video games. So I don't think it's too far outside the realm of possibility possibility that since the circuit boards were used for pathfinding and not creating story scenarios, they would have used some circuit boards of animatronics that would have had those paths built in, with Springtrap being one of them. But if William is still around in some capacity as Burntrap and/or Glitchtrap, what's the point of the Mimic plotline in Tales? Well, while Scott does use certain stories to help explain things in the games, such as William's name being first revealed in the Silver Eyes, Remnant being explored in Fazbear Frights, and GGY confirming the theory that Gregory was patient 46 and the one behind the high scores on the arcade machines, the books haven't ever been a full replacement for the stories or characters of the games. For example, Eleanor is the main antagonist of Fazbear Frights, but despite having a similar described and artistic appearance to Circus Baby, it wasn't as though Eleanor was meant to replace the game version of Circus Baby as a character, and you don't necessarily need to know who she is to understand the story of the games. As such, I find it much more likely that the Mimic storyline of Tales is most likely just meant to supplement the games, and maybe explain some things like why Burntrap has parts that don't match the Springlock suit or the Glamrock Endos, and why they would be using old circuit boards for the VR games in the first place, rather than to completely rule out all the evidence in the games for William being present. The earliest copyright we see for the first book in the Tales series is 2019, so we can tell that the Tales books weren't written in response to the backlash to the content of the games, but alongside them, with details even being changed in the books to match the final version of the games, such as how an early version of the Bobby Dots mentioned staff bot designs that were cut from Security Breach, but the final version of the story didn't. As such, I feel like the differences shown between the Mimic character and stories and what we see with Burntrap and Glitchtrap were left in intentionally, and show that if anything, the books and the games are meant to work together rather than one being intended to retcon the other. Of course, I completely understand that people are sick of William coming back again and again, and the Mimic would be a very convenient way to write him out of the story. But if William wasn't Glitchtrap or Burntrap, that would mean Mr. I Always Come Back not only didn't come back after the first game he said the line, but also that he only actually ever came back twice, once as Springtrap and once as Scraptrap. So all things considered, I don't think him coming back for Security Breach is actually quite as excessive as it probably seems. But hey, we still have a few tales from the Pizzaplex books that haven't come out yet, and the Ruin DLC is slated for sometime this year, so things could easily change. Feel free to leave a comment if you think there's something I overlooked, and I'll make sure to check it out. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video if you thought it was interesting. Don't get stabbed, and have a nice day.